Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Tuesday. It is 4 p.m. ET, and you have found us here on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze, and we are so pleased that you are here. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 16 novels of suspense. My current book, thank you, Nita. My current novel is One Wrong Word, so casually displayed on the door behind me. My new book is All This Could Be Yours, which comes out September the 9th, the same day as Dan Brown's new book. That will be a lot of fun. So you all know what to do. Every time you hear about Dan Brown's book, you think, oh, my friend Hank has a book coming out that day too, called All This Could Be Yours. And there's no better day than today to tell you that on the cover of the book is not only the title and not only my name, but the name and blurb and endorsement from the fabulous Nita Prose, who I think might have been one of the first people in the world to read my book, other than my husband and my agent and my editor. So thank you and welcome, welcome, welcome to Nita Prose. I'm going to talk for 10 more seconds, and that is, as I say, welcome to Susie Baldwin and Sue Street and Betty Fellows. And let me also welcome Nita Prose, who's brand new. The Maid's Secret comes out next week, and you will hear about it here first. We'd love that on Crime Time. And let me say that it is really rare to read a mystery where I laughed and I cried, and then I laughed and then I cried, and then I laughed and then I cried. And in the end, all I wanted to do was read the book again. I mean, it is marvelous. It is touching. It is hilarious. It is genuinely lovely and genuinely loving. And in the core, not only this just heartwarming and lovely ensemble cast and gorgeous family relationship, but a good, true, solid mystery in the midst of this. And juggling all that is quite a tour de force. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Nita Prose. I said on Instagram I would not be able to get through this without gushing. I have failed to not gush, but if anyone deserves it, it is you. Welcome, and thank you for being here.
Oh, Hank, this is such a pleasure. Thank you so much for the lovely introduction. And thank you for making me one of the first people to read your astounding new book. People, you know, Dan Brown's great and all, but I say go pre-order Hank's book, okay? That is very important. I highly endorse it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. I'm going to use that little clip that forever, for the rest of my life, forever. It's just so interesting, Nita, because this book is one of a series, although you can read them separately. And when you introduced Molly the maid to us some years ago, that pub day must have been amazing since Molly was new. But now we all love Molly and we know who she is. Can you talk a little bit about what a pub day for the first Molly book was versus how it is now?
Well, it was so different because, of course, that was still, we were in high COVID in Canada. And so, you know, pub day happened in my basement surrounded by nobody, as so many as those firsts did for us at that time, right? So it was really quite surreal. But in the time that followed, of course, when we were allowed out in the world again, I was able to meet readers, and meeting them face to face, it was so life-changing for me. Because when I finished writing that first book, I felt like I released a child into the wild and I couldn't protect them any longer. And then I was so fortunate to meet my fans who did exactly what I would hope they would, that they would care for Molly and take care of her so that I could rest and let her be with them.
Oh, I do think, though, that you created a character who was incredibly unique, one of a kind, as that means, and you couldn't have been sure whether she would have been embraced and accepted, or just sort of people would have been baffled by her.
Absolutely. I mean, I had no idea. And that's the weird thing about being a writer. As you know, I was an editor for many, many years, decades. And I always felt very secure about what I was doing. When I acquired a book, I knew why I acquired it, and I knew how to help the author. But as a writer, it's like giving away your eyes. It's giving away your perspective. You know, I always feel like unsteady. I'm not sure what I'm putting out there. I hope that I'm transmitting what I want to, but you never know until the book is actually in readers' hands.
It's funny. I hope that you're not too young to understand this, but if you've ever put a quarter in a jukebox and picked the song, and then everybody in the restaurant is listening, or everybody in the wherever it is watching you and judging you by the song you picked.
Yes.
Right. And I think that's what must have it felt like on the first day of Molly, when you are essentially introducing a new friend to people. You brought a new kid to school, and
Yeah.
you're going to like her.
Yeah. Are they going to bully her as she's been bullied so many times in her fictional life, or are they going to embrace her? And the good news is my readers are very good eggs, as Molly would say. They embraced her. They see her for who she is, and wonderfully, and I did not know this either, when one of the many things I didn't realize when writing, a character that I felt was so personal to me turned out to be universal. We've all felt that feeling of not fitting in a social situation, of not belonging, of feeling like an outsider, of saying the wrong thing and putting your foot in your mouth, all of those things that kind of define Molly. We've all felt them. And so in the end, what I learned is that Molly is actually all of us, you know?
And I couldn't have put it better myself. That is so lovely. And I'm looking, when I look over here, you all, I'm looking at the comments. Kathy Lanigan says, I've been looking forward to today. Loved the first two books. Sue Street says, I've read the rest of the series. I'm looking forward to what Molly's up to next. Here is Taylor Marie from Ontario. Mary Garrett says, I loved the Maid's Secret reviews, posted 5 stars. I adore Molly and Friends. Robin Stull is here, and Shannon Hansen. So Randy Gravitz is here. Your fans have all arrived to applaud you and look forward to your next book. Some of you may be new to A Mighty Blaze, and you have picked a marvelous day to be here. We are talking about The Maid's Secret with the marvelous Nita Prose. The Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic 5 years ago, crazily, by the powerhouse team of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us reading new books and keep us discovering new authors and talking about books and staying together as a community. And we have persevered over those 5 years, and will continue with wonderful books like The Maid's Secret, which one of you will win as we spin the wheel of fun at the end of today's program. The rest of you, if you don't win, you know what to do. Run, 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 click, click, click. Pre-order this book, which comes out next Tuesday, and you are hearing about it here first, but you need to get this on Pub Day. Trust me, you absolutely do. Let me tell you a little bit about Nita Prose, and then we will let her talk. Nita Prose is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of The Maid, which has sold more than 2 million copies worldwide. The Mystery Guest and the Mistletoe Mystery. A Good Morning America book club pick, The Maid won the Ned Kelly Award for International Crime Fiction, the Fingerprint Award for Debut Novel of the Year, the Anthony Award for Best First Novel, and the Barry Award for Best First Mystery, and was also an Edgar finalist for Best Novel. Shannon Hansen. Shannon says, can't wait to add the book to my other Molly books. Absolutely, indeed. Can you tell us just a little bit, Nita, about this book and why it's so important?
So my readers who've read any of the other books will know that, you know, one of the things I love to do is to mix genres. I call it Frankensteining. It's my favorite thing to read are books that have 2 genres mixed together. And it's also my favorite thing to write. I can't help it. I do it every time. So, you know, The Maid was a murder mystery on the one hand, but it was also feel-good fiction, or what the Brits called uplifting literature, a journey through a character's spirit, which leaves us with this feeling of hope by the end, which murder and hope don't often go together, but in my books they do. But with this book, with The Maid's Secret, I wanted to combine 2 different genres again. So on the one hand, we have Molly working at the hotel, the Regency Grand. She's at a more stable place in her life. And rather than yet another murder happening at the same hotel, because honest to goodness, who's going to go to a hotel where murder after murder after murder happens? It really strains on believability. What happens is there is sort of an antique style roadshow called Hidden Treasures, which shoots an episode in the grand tea room in the hotel. And staff are allowed to bring objects in from home to be appraised by these antique appraisers. And lo and behold, Molly brings in an object, an old trinket from her grands that turns out to be not just a little trinket, but something very, very valuable indeed. So that is the crux of the present tense story. But in order to solve the mystery of what happens, because unfortunately there's a big heist in the hotel and that very valuable object is taken away from Molly, and her life comes under threat. And then in the past, the only way we can solve the mystery is by traveling there. And in this case, you will be introduced to a whole new voice. For the first time in this series, we hear from Gran herself, as she writes letters to Molly in the form of a diary from the past, and she tells her hidden life story. So in the present tense, while Molly is going really from rags to riches, we get to watch in an epic Downton Abbey-esque love story as Gran falls in love and has to reckon with a massive change in her life, which of course Molly had no idea about.
And it's sort of rags to riches, but in the past, riches to rags, which is just such a wonderful balance. I mean, Gran is interesting, and I love her. We all do. And your origin story for Molly is lore, and I'd love you to tell that. But what about the origin story for Gran as well? Where did she come from, and how did she grow in your heart and mind?
Gran is really a composite character of a few people in my life, but most importantly, my mother. You know, my mother has been gone, or dead, as Molly would say, very dead. Why call it anything else other than what it is? She died 10 years ago. She's been dead almost 10 years. And I grieved that loss, and I grieve it still. But my mother was a force of nature, the same way Gran is. She was one of those wonderful matriarchs, and she was surrounded by other matriarchs, much like her in the community where I lived, who supported their families unconditionally, who loved friends, family, all the other kids, and did that with such open hearts and so much grace. And I was so lucky to have that at a formative age, at a young age. And that loss was so poignant to me, but I discovered something I never realized from that loss, which was that I could, with my own mind and heart and spirit, create a distillation of my mother's voice in my head so that she would always be with me. And I'm telling you, I hear my mother. You know, when I need her, she is there. She speaks to me in little sayings and aphorisms. Does that sound familiar? And they guide me. I have never lost her voice. And in some ways, and I think this is the greatest mystery of life and loss, she is more present to me now than she was when she was alive.
It's so touching to hear that. And it makes me think about the book in such a different way. It's such a love letter to your mother and a love letter to all of us, and also might change the way we look at our relationships with our moms. I remember my mom died about 10 years ago as well. And she would always say to me, "I'm not criticizing, dear. I'm just observing." And I hear that all the time.
Right? I hear it in your head all the time.
Exactly. And I still think, oh, mom would have loved this, or mom would have thought that was so funny. And even more so, I wish I could tell her she was right a lot of the time. So thank you for that. Thank you for the gift of Gran. How did you come up with her gorgeous Downton-esque backstory, though? It's so much fun to read and so cinematic and visual and relatable.
I wanted a new setting. As I said, I wanted to find a new place and find a new tapestry that I could explore. And that's something that I did in the Mystery Guest too. I took us not only to the Regency Grand, which is, that hotel that is really the formative setting of all the books. But in that book, we also have this sort of creepy, strange mansion, and that becomes a sort of fairy tale setting in the second book. And here we return to the fairy tale yet again in the past, but in this new setting, this upstairs, downstairs mansion, this glorious manor, because Gran was actually raised to be in a quite wealthy background. And I wanted to create a character so that we would see that she wasn't always who she was when we meet her in The Maid. She has to learn her moral compass. She has to find it and grow it. She didn't start out good, Hank. She started out a product of her place and time with classist values and, a certain kind of inherent arrogance that came from that set of values. And through her life experiences, which were trying, very trying, she grew a heart. And I liked that idea. I like the idea of us learning through experience, of us being challenged to make moral choices that make us grow into some people who are more humane. And we always have that choice. We can go one way or the other way. And Gran chooses the path of good, you know?
I love that she realizes it, what's happened to her along the way. And her diary is somewhat of a confession of her growth, which then teaches Molly more about someone that she already loved. How did you decide on the sort of a writerly question on the structure of a diary and how to let the readers read it before Molly reads it, which was really clever of you? Was that how it always was? And did you write the diary throughout and then section it through, or did you do it as it came?
I always go sort of chronologically, and I went back and forth almost the full time because there's a weaving that happens. One chapter informs the next in these more subtle ways. And so I couldn't write just one story, the present tense and the past, because they have to dovetail, they have to wind around each other. So they weren't written in two discrete pieces, which is harder. Much harder, but it's a lovely challenge to do it that way.
Well, you can see the structure so gorgeously and subtly in the book because the end of a diary entry is followed by a present time entry, but they're linked by words, and you couldn't do that unless you were doing it in order. The flow and the music of the book. The flow and the music of the book is so gorgeous. How much of if I'm not wrong, we knew about the treasure from the beginning of the series, right?
Yes.
And I don't want to give anything away. I'll let you do it if you like. But did you know that was going to happen?
No. In fact, I didn't know I was writing a series. Surprise. When I finished The Maid, I thought it was a one-off. And I was adamant at first. I'm not going to write another one because what if I disappoint my readers?
Mm-hmm.
What if I give less rather than more, which is always the challenge of secondary books, And with a character like this, I didn't want to do her any harm. The readers had by that point embraced her. And it was a big challenge for me to try and figure out where is there more narrative tapestry. And of course, the answer that I found is in the past. There are generations of stories that led to the creation of Molly. It's just that she doesn't know that. I have always been fascinated by junk and by lost junk. I love the idea of being that person going to a garage sale and finding that old gilt frame with, that crappy, dirty old picture of sunflowers and then suddenly realizing, oh my God, it's a Van Gogh. I love stories about that. I love antiques roadshows that feature people who are completely shocked by the value of their goods. So that always resonated in my mind since the beginning. I did not plan for that trinket on the shelf to turn into something so valuable. But I will say that I am fascinated by the mythology around the true and real Fabergé eggs. So, in 1918, when Russia was overthrown and the Romanovs were ousted, all of those precious Fabergé eggs were sold off. They went all around the world. Most of them were accounted for. But a few remain missing to this day, and we don't know where they are. We have no idea. There are 5 eggs, I believe, now that are still entirely missing. And sometimes in the past, even still, I will think about that. I'll think about that the way men think of the Roman Empire. I'll think about those 5 missing Fabergé eggs, and I'll dream about, going to a garage sale or an antique sale and finding that an egg that looks all, not burnished in the bottom of, a cardboard box and thinking, yeah, I'll spend $10 on that. And finding out, that maybe it's the real thing.
I mean, isn't that though what the book is about? Margaret in the back is saying Fabergé eggs are Nita Prose's Roman Empire. Well, isn't that the thing too about Antiques Roadshow and shows like that? That they're the engine of those shows is hope. That there's a surprise in your past, in your possession, that you always wondered if it were true. And sometimes your dreams can come true.
Yeah.
Was it, I mean, you must have also not only done research about the Fabergé eggs, but also about how a television show is produced, because it's incredibly authentic. All of the jargon and all of the bustle and all of the personalities are so true to life. Talk a little bit about that. And do you watch Antiques Roadshow and things like that? You say you love them.
I do. I'm definitely a fan. And yeah, I mean, I've in my former lives and careers, I've certainly worked around TV, and so I have a passing knowledge of that. But of course, everything needs to be translated into the world of Molly. So it's a hyper real version of that industry, right? With that cast of characters turned into, almost cliches, and then the idea is that they subvert them over time. We come to learn that maybe they're not more than just a cardboard cutout of, the host and the manager and so on.
It's interesting what you just said about seeing the world through Molly's eyes, which as a writer must be a juggle for you, because you still have your author eyes and your author brain, but you need to also, as you say, translate into Molly eyes and Molly brain. Can you talk a little bit about does that come more naturally to you now when you're in Molly's point of view, she comes out, or how does that work?
Well, I call it the gift of the gods. And every writer has a gift of the gods. So we were talking earlier before we started about what I see as your gift from the gods. And your gift is to write this sort of page-turning, propulsive narrative. And somehow through that action, we get to know your characters rather than a whole bunch of descriptions so we know the characters and then you set us on a track to move. You do that so very well, and it's your gift from the gods. You're just good at it. And my gift from the gods is voice, it's character. So I didn't have to work that hard to find Molly's voice. It came to me. I literally heard it in my head one day after a funny little encounter with a maid in a hotel. And I heard that voice. I was on my plane ride home because I was in the UK at the time. And I picked up a napkin and I wrote what I heard on that napkin. And that turned out to be the prologue of The Maid. So I've never had to work on that. Now that sounds like, oh, wow, she's so brilliant. Oh, let me tell you, I had to work hard on everything else. Writing is difficult. Any writer who tells you anything else, they're not being honest. It is difficult. It is lonely. It is challenging. You will get your gift from the gods. You will have those moments where you're in the flow state and everything is so easy. But the only thing that is certain about those moments is they will disappear. Yeah. When you are done with that moment, you will be left with your craft. And you will have to turn to your tools and understanding narrative and form and structure in order to figure out your way forward. And yes, Taylor, I still have the napkin. In fact, I might just duck over there and find it for you.
Do that. That'd be great. That'd be great. Because I'd love you to tell the story if it's possible that someone in the audience has not heard where this came from. I would love you to tell the moment that she arrived in your brain. So you found the napkin, but let's tell the story.
And we'll end with that in a second. So yes, so I was in the UK, and as I said, I worked for a few major publishers, and at the time I was working for Simon & Schuster, and I was at a book fair in the UK. I ducked out from my hotel for a meeting. I came back into my hotel room, and I completely surprised the roommate who was cleaning my room. And the exquisitely embarrassing part, really, it could have been worse, but it was pretty bad, was that in her hands, she had my disgusting inside out track pants, which were sweaty still, which I'd thrown in a big heap on my bed in my rush to change and go out for this meeting. And she was trying to fold them so nicely and put them back on the neat made bed. And I barged in. She looked at me sort of embarrassed, and I looked at her humiliated. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, it is such an invisible and like thankless job to be a roommate, and so intimate too. She'd been cleaning my room for weeks. She knew everything about me, and I knew not a thing about her. She knew the meds I took, the makeup I wore, where I was going, because my schedule was at everything. And I knew nothing about this woman. We never spoke a word to each other. That is how it ended. She left, I went on with my day. But days later, that's when I started to hear Molly's voice in my head. And that is when
Look at that.
I wrote on this napkin,
Oh,
and it starts, I am your maid. I'm the one who cleans your hotel room, who enters like a phantom when you are gallivanting for the day, and so on. And this little napkin is almost word for word the prologue for that first book. Gift from the gods, everything else I worked for.
I mean, what do you think about that? I mean, was it the moment in time of your life when all the dominoes fell and you just needed that one little inciting incident? Joel says that is an amazing story. Yes, it is. That if it would have happened a year before or a year later, it wouldn't have been the time. How do you feel about this sort of consciousness?
Well, creative thought does have its moments, but I think everyone has sort of creative lightning bolts that descend, and one must choose. You have to choose what you're going to do with it. Are you going to harness it, or are you going to go and watch Netflix? And it's those are difficult choices. They're not easy, right? Because they involve other people and families and time.
And it might not work, and you might be wrong. And what if you're wasting your time?
Fear for me was a big one. All of those things. So to actually make the choice after you have that creative lightning bolt strike is actually a hard thing to commit to. And most often, it's easier to turn away because, it gets harder and harder and harder, but, writing is a wonderful thing to do. And if you love it, you will do it.
Yes. If you love it, you will do it. That is another thing that my mother told me. I have to tell you that when I was writing my first book and I called her and said, I love this book and I think it will work, but I'm not sure I can do it. I'm just not sure I can do it. And she said, well, dear, you will if you want to. And I hear that from now on. And that is my gift to all of you. Sylvia says, why is that napkin not framed?
I don't know. I just feel that is a good question. I don't know. There's something about framing something that makes it so grandiose. And for me, it was, you can literally see coffee stains.
No, I love the coffee. I was wondering if it was wine or coffee. Julie is here, and Deborah is here. Sue Street and Renee Herskowitz. Julie Brinkley is here. Everybody is here today. Shannon Hansen and Taylor Marie and Robin. Yeah, so nice to see you. Hi, Catherine Holland. Let me just go quickly because we're running out of time, and this is so silly because I could talk to you for totally ever. The secondary characters, and I sort of hesitate to call them that, is that, well, let's go back to Molly just for a minute, though. Yes, so you had this bolt of the maid, but how did you get? But the person who cleaned your room was not this super unique personality. Where did she come from?
Right. So that was one source of inspiration, and the other was a more subconscious source that I only realized when I was completely done the book. Years ago, before I was an editor, I worked as a teacher, and I taught special needs kids. And it was a formative time in my life. I loved it. The kids were challenging. They were brilliant. They were exuberant. They were difficult. They were this, panoply of many, many things. And one of the things I love to do is to take them out on field trips. But I really mean that loosely. I don't mean just going to museums and art galleries. Sometimes we would just go across the street to the little donut shop, and we'd sit there and we'd have our lesson there. And at first I thought we did that for the kids, to get them acclimatized to different situations and to be out in public. But over time, I learned that was not why we were doing this. We weren't doing this for the kids. We were doing this for everyone else. We were doing this for the neuronormative people who needed to get used to the fact that not everyone else in the world is exactly like they are. Most people, when we were out and about, would treat these kids with the same dignity that they would treat anybody, except for the people who didn't. And I've never forgotten those people. And somehow they made a mark on me. And I didn't realize how deep that mark was until I finished The Maid. Because what I actually did was take the best characteristics of all of those kids that I used to teach, and I gave them all to a single character as a kind of tribute.
And it's interesting, though, because the Molly that we meet in the first book is, she's changed now. She's grown now. She has gotten some power now. She's gotten some qualities of observance and understanding, and she's a little bit found herself, sort of like Gran found herself. Can you talk a little bit about writing that, and how determined you were to do that, how necessary it was to do that, and that's your gift to Molly? Or how do you see that?
I see it like this. I see it like life. Our first job is to know ourselves, because we can't really progress as human beings without some sort of self-understanding. But after that point, once we know a little bit about who we are and we're a little more comfortable in our own skins, then we can turn to grow empathy for others, to embrace others, to try and understand, each other's differences and peculiarities. And through that, we can foment compassion and kindness. But it's only after you know yourself that you can start on that track. And that's how we start to see Molly in The Maid's Secret and in The Mystery Guest. In The Mystery Guest, she's on a journey trying to understand this matriarch who carved a path for her and made her, prepared her for a life that really could have been much more difficult than it was. But she had so much love from that woman and so much direction. And then in the next book, in this book, in The Maid's Secret, we start to see Molly having an even deeper understanding of Gran. Gran finally, even after her death, lets her in, because she's ready then. She's ready to hear it.
But it's not only, and forgive me to push you, but it's not only an understanding of Gran, but an understanding of her world and her relationships with people and how she deals with people, how she understands the world, how she reads them now, how she looks at herself in a different way. Yeah. She has changed over these books.
She has. And part of that is finding community. That has acted as a sort of ground under her feet. She has Juan Manuel, her beautiful fiance, etc. And he loves her so well. He really does. He accepts her truly for who she is. And, she could almost do no wrong. And
let's talk about that a little bit, because this is a mystery, certainly, and a caper and historical novel, but it's also such a love story. It is such a beautiful love story. And the idea that, and it's not only love between Juan Manuel and Molly, but throughout the past as well, and in the present as well. And that's one of the things that's so touching about this book, is the understanding of what love means and what the sacrifices that people have to make, and how they understand those sacrifices and what happens after that. And as you're writing this book, I mean, you must have been envisioning all of us weeping or tearing up throughout and feeling compassion. How did you feel throughout writing it with those kinds of themes?
I can't ask you to feel unless I feel it first. When I write Molly, I sit behind her eyes. I feel like I become her to find her experience and to feel it. And for me, that is the only way to deliver that emotional response to the reader, whether it's making them laugh or making them cry or something in between. So I don't think about doing that to the reader. I think of going on that journey myself, almost the way an actor does.
Sure.
I embody it. I feel it. I did that with both Gran and Molly.
I wondered if your posture even changed as you're sort of method acting and channeling Gran.
Yes. Like when I think about Gran, like I start to sit back, my shoulders move, my voice softens. It has this gravitas. But when I think of Molly,
yes.
I talk like this. It is precise. Every letter is enunciated. Do you understand? You know, I feel these characters, like they live in me so that I can transmit that experience to the reader.
And if you're just joining us, we're talking about The Maid's Secret, the brand new book by Nita Prose that comes out next week. It has this spectacular cast, ensemble cast of secondary, but they're not secondary characters, of the people in Molly's world, which must have been a joy to create and create new ones for this book. Can you talk a little bit about how you balance all those marvelous people and how you gave them such different and wonderful personalities?
Well, that's, like I said, where the hard work comes in, you know, because they don't come out all perfectly formed like that gift from the gods. And that's something you have to find, and you have to go draft over draft and ask yourself, what is missing? Why does this feel so, incomplete? What does the character do that shows us who they are? And so for me, that's a lot about asking the right questions to find character when I'm lost, when I don't understand them all. I'll ask myself a whole set of questions, and that'll be different every time. But like, what is the purpose of the character in this scene or in this moment? How would Molly respond how do these characters go together? Molly and the other characters, do they butt up against each other, or are they copacetic? And what can they actually do in an action, in a scene, in a moment, in a beat that will reveal who they are? Because of course, we have to deliver characters through action. I can't just tell you who a character is through description only. It's really through dialogue and momentum that we see a character grow.
And I cannot wait for you all to read this, because you will laugh at the marvelous character Speedy. I don't know how you got him. The people who are in charge, I won't give you any more, you all, of the Antiques Roadshow type show are wonderful. The hotel, everyone. And in the past, the characters in the past are heartbreakingly, terrifyingly, really realistically relatable. And it is absolutely a tour de force. There's also, and then I have two more questions, and then we'll go to the audience questions. So many people here today. Mindy is here, and Maria Alicia is here, and Deborah Press and Susie Baldwin. You'll have to read those when you have time, in your spare time. There's also a theme of fame in this. How Molly, who felt small at the beginning of the books, sort of like you as a new author, becomes massively in the spotlight, so much so that it's almost terrifying. Your book events are attended by thousands of people. You're acclaimed. You're well known. People would recognize you walking down the street. That must have been a surprise, and also a juggle to deal with.
When I was an editor, and I was an editor for so long, a book midwife, as I thought of myself, my job was to exist in the shadows and to push my authors into the light, to help them with their books, make them the best they can be. And then when promo comes, when it's time to promote, you go out there and you shine. So it was really the antithesis of what I had to do when I changed roles and became a writer myself. It still feels strange to me. Even now, being on Crime Time, I'm like, wait a second, this is weird. What? I should be behind the scenes here, cheering on my author. I shouldn't be the one being the author. It feels still a little bit like Alice in Wonderland, even these many years later. But, there are so many things about Molly that in strange ways are really reflections of who I am, And I think that's one of them. That feeling of invisibility that she has is something that I've always understood innately. And I think it comes from a lot of sources, but partly because part of my job was to be in the background and push others into the light.
Well, you've certainly pushed Molly into the light, and we love it. I love that this is yellow. It feels like that. And there is nothing like writing a wedding, Nita. That will be my last question. Can you talk a little bit about it? I mean, it isn't giving anything away to say that there is one. Was that so much fun to write?
Oh my goodness. So one of the things that I really like to do for myself is, and this sort of happens kind of naturally, is I know the ending. Like I know it when I start, but I won't let myself write it. I could honestly write the ending of my book on the second day of me thinking about it, but I won't do it. I have to hold on to it because I have to earn it. I have to earn the right to write the ending, and I have to go through all this drudgery and sludge and difficult terrain in order to get there. So when I get there and I write that scene, I'm telling you, it is such a relief. I feel so buoyant and light that I finally earned the right to do it. So yes, that the wedding scene that nearly ends the book, it's not quite the end, but very close. Was a delight and joy for me to write, and I hope that transmits on the page.
And even the final, a tiny little twist in the wedding, that again, you bring in the family, is just so thoughtful and so caring. I mean, I have to say that I wrote in this book as I was reading it, forgive me, but it's an advanced reader copy. I wrote fragile, fragile, fragile throughout of it. It's just like this tightrope that you were walking in the novel, to be caring and careful and kind and smart and witty without being slapstick. I mean, it is, I'm now gushing again, but you have created an iconic character, and you have given all of us a gift, and we are just so grateful for this. And we cannot wait to see you on the road. Go to Nita's website to see her book tour schedule. But first, let's take some questions from the audience. I know we have so many people who came today. Deborah says, hi Deborah, how much research did you have to do to come up with the information for Gran's lifestyle and time?
I had to do quite a lot, in fact. Now, what I do in these books is I'm not trying to create reality. Anyone who wants reality will not be happy with my books. They are not police procedurals. This is not a James Patterson. It's not going to work that way in my books. But there is a hyper reality, so it feels familiar and yet almost like a fairy tale. So there was a lot of research that I had to do to create that upstairs, downstairs, to understand the roles in an Edwardian house, and how those different roles might change when one of those houses can no longer support itself, So yes, there was a lot of research I had to do to get that time right, but still to give that feeling of a certain kind of surreality to it.
And I love the whole theme of the value of things, and how the value of things depends on who you are and where you are and what they are and how they affect your life, and how they can matter and how they cannot matter. It's just so beautifully subtle, the whole thing. Oh, who else has a question? I know Margaret is stacking them in the back. Margaret says, that's so funny, Margaret. Do you get recognized by hotel maids who've read the book?
No, I don't. It's funny that you asked this, Margaret, because I keep wondering, one day, am I going to get an email from the maid who I stumbled across that day, who was folding up my disgusting pants? Is she going to write to me and say, hey, you're talking about me on all these interviews? I wait for that day. I think that, it was probably just another moment in a series of moments for her. But for me, it ended up being such a seismic moment. But no, not very often do I get recognized by hotel maids. Thank goodness. I'll tell you what, though, I tip them well now. Oh my goodness, do I? I understand that job, having lived it through Molly, and I'm a good tipper.
Right. I agree with you. I love that, though, that her life, as we could make it up, her life just went on, and your life changed tectonically as a result of something that you could not have predicted. That's just such a lesson for everyone. Yeah. Who else has a question? We'll do one more question or two. Catherine says, are those all translations of the series behind you?
Well, not everything. I have a lot of books that I've edited back there, my beloved authors from the past. Some are translations, and some are different English language books as well. But a lot of these books behind me are books by my favorite writers, and many that I've edited.
When you first saw the cover that they were going to do the style in this way, what did you think when you saw the first book and realizing that this was going to be the theme of how it looked?
Well, it took some time to get there, and I really wanted an Art Deco feel, and I wanted that sense of something hidden and something shown, that idea of the mystery being personified in the cover design. That was really important to me. So I'll say that with The Maid, it took us a while to land on the conceit of the book. Now, by the time the Maid's Secret rolled around, oh my goodness, I think the designer, Eleanor, she nailed it in like one take. It was like, bam, she's done. And that, let me tell you, and Hank can attest to this, that doesn't happen often. Okay. It's usually you see cover after cover and nobody's quite happy with it, or one person is, but not the entire team. But with the Maid's Secret cover that you're seeing, I mean, it was almost pitch perfect from the very first draft. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like a family crest. And also the maid holding the diary. More we will not say, but you will get it when you see it. One last question. I love that expression, sitting behind her eyes. How did you get around to seeing how Molly looked?
I always felt she had dark, very straight hair, that she would have a functionality to her appearance.
Oh,
Because she's not the kind of person, certainly not the kind of woman to worry too much about her appearance. She worries, especially in the first book. She worries so much about how she's going to come across, but she's not somebody to think that her appearance would be part of how others relate to her. It would never cross her mind. So I knew that she would have dark hair, so that she would wear it straight. She would do nothing to it. She would not really think of makeup, but that there would be a beauty to her simplicity that she would never see in herself, that she would never be able to recognize, but that people around her would see, and that would come to grow and live, and that she would grow into that sort of natural beauty. And she does. And, Juan Manuel, her boyfriend, he sees it. He sees it every day. He just walks around with stars in his eyes because she's so naturally beautiful.
And then in this book, she finally sees it too.
She finally comes to see that beauty is a feeling. That beauty is a feeling. It has to come from inside. It has to grow. It has to become a light, and then it will surface. But if you don't feel it yourself, it'll never project outwards.
Listen to Nita, you all. This is all life lessons from Nita. But I have a question from Randy, who says, I read and listen. So glad the narrator also brings the characters to life. And Robin says narrators are so important. How do you feel about the audiobooks?
Thank you, Randy. And you're absolutely right. Lauren Ambrose is the reader, and she is incredible as Molly. I could not have imagined a better Molly in all my days. I am so grateful to her for doing all 4 books, and to really having a deep understanding of who that character is, and to bringing it to life.
It's marvelous. When you hear that voice, and it almost brings tears to your eyes, like that's a real person.
There she is.
And our final question from Sue Street, who says, what's next for you? Are you working on another book yet?
I am, Sue. I hope you'll read it. So this is the grand finale of the series. I'm not going to say I'm never going to write another Molly, but I'm certainly not going to write another Molly sometime soon, maybe in many, many years. But I feel like I need to leave her where she is for a bit and turn to new things. And, I'm turning to something so different. It is a mystery thriller. It is set in cottage country by a lake. And it involves an older woman who's in her 80s, and her grandkids come over to her lakeside cottage, and they go traipsing around on the property and into the woods, and they come back with something that, the protagonist hoped would remain buried forever. And, as she nears the end of her life, she has to reckon with this secret that she has literally and figuratively kept buried for decades. And of course, we travel back in time to when she was a young girl in the 1950s, living on the lake with her family. It deals with the grief and the wonder of having a sister and losing her. It is a love story about new nascent love and that idea of that golden summer where everything changes. It's, a story about how nature can be so harmful to us and be a benefactor at the same time. It can heal and it can destroy. And how, as we age, we can look back at our memories and we can see them differently in a light that we couldn't before. We can learn something different, but we can have closure, but maybe never how we thought. So that is the tapestry that I'm working on. As you can tell, it's quite different. I think the only similarity is the fact that, again, I'm looking behind the eyes of a new character. It's not a cozy mystery. It is not. But I do think that I'm fascinated by prickly characters, and this is another prickly character. And if I do my job right, wish me luck. By the end of this novel, you will come to love her.
Never a dull moment from Nita Prose, The Secrets of the Past, revealed by love and self-examination and hope for the future and hope for change. It sounds absolute. Does it have a title? Can I push you on that?
It has a working title, so I can't share it. Who knows what the title will be?
Well, I hope you will come back and talk with us.
I would love to.
We cannot wait to hear about The Summer by the Lake. That is not the title. Hear about your new book. In the meantime, bon voyage and safe travels and happy travels and much acclaim for the wonderful The Maid's Secret. It is quite a treasure, and I cannot wait for you all to read it. One of you lucky people is going to win a copy of it right now, and let's see who that would
be.
I think we should have music for this. We still haven't figured out what that's going to be, but the winner is Sherry Raybach. Great. Congratulations, Sherry. Sherry is a long time Crime Time fan and stalwart. So we are so thrilled that she has won this. You know what to do, Sherry. Email me and we will email Nita's people, and Nita's people will get you the book while Nita is on the road. That is fantastic. Congratulations. Let me just hold you for one more second to tell you next week at 4 p.m. ET, we will hear from Katie Hayes about her brand new Saltwater. You remember Katie wrote The Cloisters, which was absolutely brilliant. And I have not read one word of this yet. I'm starting tonight. So I will read it over the week, and you know you will love it, and you hear about it next Tuesday right here at 4 p.m. ET on Crime Time. Nita, congratulations on this. And are you off on tour?
I am. My tour starts on pub day, and then it doesn't stop for almost 6 weeks. So I'm going to be on the road. So if you go to my website at nitaprose.com, you can find out where. And gosh, I would like to meet you. So come on in.
And we will be together on Cape Cod in June. So if you'd like to join us at the We Can event in June on Cape Cod, look at both of our websites for all of the info about that. And you can follow Nita on Instagram at Nita Prose. And please do that. You all, Nita, thank you for being here. It's just been fantastic.
Thank you so much, Hank. It's been such a pleasure.
And you all, thank you for being here. All of you, we love seeing you here at Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. We will see you right here next Tuesday. And remember, until then, it is always safe inside a book.